The Southern Premier League has indicated that it is sometimes difficult to interpret reports that they receive following incidents of ill discipline, and that there is concern that players sometimes receive a more lenient punishment than the incident might have merited. They've also identified that on occasions the procedure followed by the umpires might give the players grounds for a successful appeal, resulting in that player not receiving any punishment at all. Against this background, we have prepared this presentation. Before we start, ask yourself a question. Do you think that player behaviour in the Southern Premier League over the last 5 years has improved, stayed the same, or become worse? Give the matter a little bit of thought and then think about the following. Anecdotally, we hear that behaviour is getting worse. But what do we umpires tell everybody about player behaviour? The major mechanism that we have for guiding clubs, players and the league about how we umpires see player behaviour is through the fair play marks that we award after each match. The average marks over the last 5 seasons make it interesting reading. These marks are averaged over around 700 reports and are shown on the screen. These fair play marks certainly don't reflect a decline in behaviour. Indeed, they suggest a slight improvement. Is that your experience? Perhaps there is another source to confirm the anecdotal reports. Perhaps the number of disciplinary reports supports the anecdotal evidence. Let's see how many of these have been submitted over the same period. Statistically, the sample is too small to be significant, but there isn't any major increase in disciplinary reports over the period. It isn't the purpose of the presentation to major on the change in player behaviour, so we will leave that matter there and move on. It might be good for us all to reflect on these figures when we sit down at the end of our matches this season and complete the fair play documentation. Watch the following incident. If you were one of the umpires, what would you do after seeing this incident? Traditionally, umpires have dealt with this event by inviting the bowler and his captain into the umpire room at the end of the match. The umpires would read the riot act and advise the player that his actions would be reported. Think about this and decide. Would you still do that? Or would you do something else? Ideally, you would do something else. The laws of cricket now require that disciplinary issues are dealt with on the field of the play at the time of the incident, and that the decision to report or not is made at the same time. The ECP Disciplinary Code makes it clear that if the umpires do not follow the procedures set out in Law 42, then the player can appeal, and that the appeal must be upheld. The purpose of this session is to refresh the minds of umpires about the process that we need to follow when we encounter inappropriate player behaviours. With the introduction of Law 42, umpires are now instructed in law to deal with incidents of misbehaviour on the field immediately. If we do not do so, ECB rules mean that the player will be able to successfully appeal against any disciplinary action. One area that causes umpires some concern is the requirement to summon the captain, particularly of the batting side. In practice, it is simply a matter of ensuring that the captain is made aware of the issue and the importance that is attached to it. Perhaps the word summon is a bit strong, but as always, it is the skill of the umpire in dealing with players that is really important here. It is good practice to have the conversation with the captain away from other players who might feel inclined to share their view of events. The conversation might require calling the batting captain onto the field to tell him what has happened and the implications of the incident. Remember that the captain is, hopefully, not the offender, and that the conversation is simply an advice to him, not a telling off. It is not necessary to call the captain and the player to the umpire's room after the match. You have already dealt with the issue, and the captain knows that you will be submitting a report. The procedure to be followed and the punishments due are all detailed on the directive card that we all receive from the ECB ACO each year. The card must be a standard part of our on-field equipment. Hopefully we will not need it, but if we do, it is there to help us ensure that we follow the correct procedure. The Southern Premier League is advising that some of the disciplinary reports that they receive are confusing and difficult to act upon. This makes issuing an appropriate punishment difficult. So we need to think a bit about our report writing. The basic instruction is keep it simple. Report the offence only. There is no need to put it into context. We are not writing a school essay or a novel. So if a player says, "That was an appalling decision," report that. It is not necessary to state that the comment was made following an appeal for LBW or as a result of the batter having been given out. Many of the reports submitted in recent years ramble, giving lots of irrelevant information. The punishment tariff for offences is set by the ECB. It does not allow the punishment to be increased because the player was a pain in the neck up until they went too far and the umpires decided to report them. You are looking at a particular report that is fictional, but it is not unusual. What do you take from it? Could you see a disciplinary committee acting upon this report easily? The best reports are short and to the point. This is good news for umpires. It means that we spend far less time writing the report. We must, however, advise that we followed the correct procedure. Following this meeting, we will be contacting all panel members by email to confirm the content of this presentation. That email will include model wording for umpires to add to their reports, telling the disciplinary committee what procedure they followed. The rather poor disciplinary report that we looked at a couple of slides ago could ideally have been written like this. It is worth noting that for the purposes of this document and out of respect for our audience, the expletives have been treated with a number of asterisks. In a usual report, umpires must report the actual words used without censorship. As you can see, the new report summarises the incident in 35 words, compared with the original 185-word ramble. The standard wording about procedure can be copy and pasted from the email that you will receive shortly. The pro forma report available in the post-match paperwork has room for all the details that must be recorded. That data must be provided. Generally, umpires will not wish to complete the disciplinary report at the ground using their phone, with players around and giving the benefit of their opinion. It is common for the fair play report to be completed with a note that a disciplinary report will follow. The umpires then communicate by email to complete the disciplinary form. A copy of the pro forma will be sent with the upcoming email. Thank you for your time. Remember that we all have a role to play in preventing bad behaviour, and let's make sure that players who do transgress are not able to escape action because the umpires didn't follow procedure. Here's hoping that nobody actually needs to use anything that we have talked about here, that the sun shines and that the cricket season is a great one.